welcome. My name is Rubydung. Welcome to today's episode. As you can see, I'm here at the Nether water base. However, there might be something that stands out to you a little bit more than the location I'm currently presiding at. That is probably the timer up at the top corner. That is because today is a very special episode. Today marks, if you were to watch all of my episodes consecutively, back to back to back to back, it would consume a total of 24 hours of content. Solid. No breaks, nothing. Just a solid 24 hours of edited content, which is very special to me. So, 12 minutes from now, that's going to be going off. However, I plan on doing something very interesting this episode. Today is going to be a bit of a recap episode for all of those who might have not been watching the series or might be interested in hearing what I've currently done so far in the series. So, today's going to be a little bit of some talking. So, let me go over here, and I'll show off to you what I have constructed is a new part of the base. So, I want to show it off just a little bit. As I go over here, there's a door. Oh my gosh, there's a door. Well, what's behind the door is the interesting thing. So, I go over to the door, opening it up. A whole bunch of signs. Oh boy, what is this about? Well, when I run down the length of it, if you'll notice, looking at some of them, these might appear quite familiar. This is every episode, name, and day of upload for every single one of my episodes. So, I kind of want to talk about these a little bit, and also give you an idea of what I think of each of them. So, let's do a bit of a recap for those of you who may not know what's going on. And I also might flash on a couple of images on the screen to give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about. So, let's get started. First off, we are talking the new dimension, the Nether. That's episode 1, very special episode for obvious reasons. This one, don't exactly do too much in this episode. What I do is I go down, I make a dirt house, and I make a mine. That's about it. That's the entire episode, but it's episode 1, so you don't really need to do a whole lot in episode 1, so that's about it. Episode 2, I actually begin construction on the underground mine, which is a very big project in my world, and has literally no purpose. It's just a massive stone underground thing. Then we go over to episode 3. This is, in this episode, I just do testing with, how the new portal thing works. I do have a relic from this episode. It's 4 blocks of obsidian I have just neglected to delete off my beach. It just kind of sits there forever, and I just haven't bothered getting rid of it for some reason. Then, episode 4, that is the mob fairy. That is, one where I just spend the whole episode constructing this fairy that I never use. It's just a thing to carry mobs to a center point. I never use it at any point. I technically use the design a lot, but I don't actually use the actual thing I built. Because it was meant for a mob farm that I never actually finished. So, one day I may finish it. Episode 5, this is where I actually build a base. It's not until episode 5 that I actually have a quote-unquote base, in which my base is an outline and not even a floor. At this time, my base wasn't even a floor. It was more of a wall than a floor. So, yeah. Over to episode 6. This is where I actually began constructing a sugarcane farm. That's right, I had a sugarcane farm before I actually had a base. Just let that sit in for you for a little bit. I made a sugarcane farm before I actually made a base. Over to episode 7, I begin making an actual storage system, because previously my storage system was in the mob farm that I was constructing. Didn't want that, actually began constructing what I would believe to be my storage system. It's the storage system that I use nowadays that I have just neglect to actually make a better one, even though I have a better design. Then over 8, this is where I actually built the thing. A previous episode was me talking about, laying out the foundation for where I would be building it, because obviously I'd build walls and flooring for it. This one is where I actually built it. Over to episode 9, Christmas Trees, uploaded on Christmas Day, is where I begin constructing where I'd be using my, nowadays, current oak farm. So, this is where that would begin. I believe this all starts, though, with just the floor. The trees aren't even put in this episode. The trees wait till water flow and burning leaves. This is where I actually begin constructing the collection system and actually plant in the trees. So, yeah, not exactly a whole lot, not exactly much of a tree farm till this episode. Over to episode 11, exterior decoration. This is where I put in the classic pillars in my base, the massive oak pillars that run everywhere. This is the episode where I actually come up with that design. Over to episode 12, charcoal hype. Possibly the most important episode for me that no one else, none of my viewers even remotely recognizes how important this episode is. This is where charcoal came out in the game. And to this day, charcoal is one of my most used items in the entire game. All of the torches in this little tunnel here are even made with charcoal. I require so much charcoal, you have no idea. The charcoal being added to this game is possibly one of the most important things that has ever happened to this world. Over to episode 13, auto mob drowning. This is where I actually designed the auto mob drowner, despite not having a mob farm. I designed a drowner and didn't have a mob farm, so that's just kind of weird, I know, but the drowner still exists to this day, though heavily modified. Over to episode 14, Sky Corridors. This is where I begin constructing the Sky Farm. So I had a mob farm that's constructing underground, however, it still needed a lot of digging. And I was like, I can make one up in the air. Why not? I can just make one up in the air. So I did that. And to this date, that's the main mob farm that I use. Over to episode 15, Excessive Resource Waste. This is where I actually finish the mob farm. I don't know if I actually finish it this episode, but this is where I put in the main part of all the resources, in which case is where I officially run out of stone. And ever since this episode, I have been having stone issues. Over to episode 16, Accidental Experiment. This is where I get an idea for being able to do a collection system for items, in which case I come across the thing of a furnace minecart being forcibly stopped by an item. And then the entire episode is dedicated to experimenting with this furnace minecart. I'm still to this date fascinated by the furnace minecart. I still want to find a way to do more with them, though sadly there's not much to do with them. Episode 17, Exteriors and Extensions. This is where I actually begin putting in more of those oak pillars, so this is where it becomes a more mainstay of the base. However, what's more notable is I actually make the main bridge. That is what's going to wind up leading to my wheat farm, my mushroom farm, the zombie spawner, and my main bed, along with my mine. Over to 18, this is where I actually construct the mushroom farm. Though it will not work for many episodes, I wound up constructing it in this episode. Over to episode 19, Burning Support. For this one, if I remember correctly, I actually begin working on the passive mob farm. Also, why it's called Burning Support, this is the first time my base ever burned down, though it ended early. So, this is the first time and the most notable time my base has ever burned down. Over to episode 20, this is going to be various paths. On this particular episode, I was just doing mine work, in which case I believe this is where I begin working more on the new mine that I basically just inputted. In case you're curious, it's the one with the cobble stairs. Over to episode 21, this is going to be Water Destination Channeler. I'm so annoyed that this is literally one letter off from fitting. This is where I actually construct the wheat farm that I would wind up using. Sadly, I don't use it as much nowadays, even though I absolutely need to. I need to stop eating melons. Over to episode 22, this is where I actually put in the wheat for the wheat farm. That's right, I had a wheat farm with no wheat. Kind of an interesting trend that goes on with this series. A lot of planning without actual inputs. Over to episode 23, this is the April Fool's episode, where Steve Code chests were put into the game, and I spent a lot of this episode just trying to get the locked chests, as they're now known. In which case, I actually have several sitting on my base, so a little bit of a screenshot there for you. Over to episode 24, in which case, this is where I built the zombie farm, in which case it's a feather farm at this time, because zombies dropped feathers back then. A lot of this episode was dedicated to me building the auto zombie farm. Not much was really going on this episode outside of building the farm. Over to episode 25, Design Department. If I remember correctly for this episode, this is actually where I decide that I'm going to begin using bricks on my tunnels. So, where you see, whenever you walk around my base, you see that there's tunnels that have brick for the roofs. This is the episode where I make that official decision. Over to episode 26. This is if I remember correctly, for episode 26. Oh, I'm trying to remember what happened this episode. Oh, I don't think much got done this episode because I think this is when Portal 2 released, so didn't exactly get a whole lot done on this episode because of it. Episode 27. This is where achievements were added, the previous update. So I was spending most of this episode actually just grinding achievements, in which case I got all but 2 of them, if I remember correctly, in which case the 2 achievements I didn't get were On a Rail and When Pigs Fly. However, for the next couple of episodes, 28, Big Bridge, this is where I begin constructing the bridge that I would go to use to try to get the On a Rail achievement. However, this bridge would go on to be used for my transport base. Over to episode 29, this is going to be preheating, in which case this is where I actually construct the second floor to my base. This is the floor that has all the furnaces that I've actually used a surprising amount of, despite there being way too many. Then there is episode 30, On a Rail. This is where I get the actual achievement. This is where I laid out all the rails, all the stone to make the actual thing. Look, a lot of resources, but I actually get the achievement in this episode. Then there's episode 31. This is going up, in which case this is where I decide to actually begin using trapdoors in the exterior of my base. So the exterior of my base is now official, where it is bricks, logs, planks, glass, and trapdoors. That is the exterior of the base. There's only one other thing that's missing, in which case that will not come for a while. 32, windows and doors. For this particular episode, if I remember correctly, this is where I actually begin constructing, like, walls. A lot of my base did not have walls up until this episode. Literally 30 episodes in, I didn't actually have real windows or walls. I just had pillars that were separating me from the outside world. I was just on a floating stone platform until this episode, so a little bit of a fun thing there. Episode 33, this one is where I actually begin constructing the transport base. So this is the second base that officially comes up, so my official second base. Episode 34, Passive Mob Farm. This is where I actually finished the Passive Mob Farm. It took me forever because I was having to wait for grass to grow for an eternity, but the grass finally came to, and it worked for, if I remember correctly, it worked for 11 episodes before it broke. So that's fun. Then we have Turn to Stone on episode 35. This is going to be where I actually construct my second mine. This is going to be the main mine out at my transport base, the massive hole. This is where I begin constructing that. Over to episode 36, Whole Lot Nothing. This is where I actually make the massive hole and the branch mines for it. So this episode is like the big thing of the transport base, where it's the massive hole and also all the rails, which is obviously a little episodes before that. Episode 37, Little Birch. This is where I construct my second tree farm at my main base, in which case it's a birch farm, because I wanted to farm multiple types of woods, even though I don't really use it. I actually probably should convert that birch farm over to an oak farm or something, because it doesn't do anything. I'd never use that birch farmer nowadays. Over to 38, this is going to be bricks. This episode is the episode that tripled my world file size because of how much I explored in this one episode, because I really required clay. I spent the whole episode out looking for clay because I really needed bricks, because I was planning on building the roofs for that one tunnelway to my wheat farm, my mushroom farm, my zombie spawner, and what is now the mine. So this whole episode was basically me exploring. Over to episode 39, Remote Location. This is where I construct the third base. Though the third base, even to this date, doesn't really have anything going on there. It's basically just a nice middle place that I was using to basically experiment with some of the more weird things that were coming out around this time. Over to episode 40, Coming Together. This one is where I actually put in a floor for my base. And remember earlier when I was talking about I didn't have a floor in my base? Well, I had a first floor. I didn't have any other floors, though. So this is where I actually put in flooring to my base, so I could actually go, you know, up and down. Over to episode 41, this is where I actually construct an automatic sugarcane farm. Though, the design I constructed didn't work at all. I actually am shocked by how terrible the design was and how I oversaw it completely. The build was awful, and I don't understand how I oversaw it. Episode 42, Answer Everything. This particular episode was this particular episode was for, if I remember correctly, what was it? Oh, that's right! I was constructing watchtowers along the railway. So the railway going from my main base to the transport base, I decided, I'm going to decorate that and put up some watchtowers. So just kind of put up watchtowers in this base. In case anyone's curious why it's called Answer Everything, it's a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference. So, fun fact there. Over to episode 43, Building to Glass. This one is, if I remember correctly, oh man, which one's this? This is where I get a little bit harder to remember stuff. I believe this is where I actually construct a roof to my wheat farm, so I actually put in that. I believe I also do a roof to the tree farm in this episode. That's hence why it's Building to Glass, because I was having to do walling and ceilings made of glass. Over to episode 44, Top It Off. This one is for this particular episode. I believe I work on the sugarcane farm again, because obviously it was completely broken, so needed to rework it a little bit. Over to episode 45, I actually give a world tour. So this is the first world tour and also the most recent one. Though you could probably consider this episode to be a pseudo world tour. I'm not really doing a world tour. I'm just basically doing an episode recap, because I want to celebrate 24 hours, so sue me. Yeah, this is basically what that episode was about. Over to episode 46, Loving Lava. This is where I actually put in the lava ceiling for my transport base. Over to episode 47, this one is where I do a recap of all of the features that were added in Beta 1.8 of the game, because Beta 1.8, in case anyone doesn't know, was a very, very big update, and it required a whole episode just to describe the difference. Over to episode 48, Growing Melons. This is where I begin constructing a pumpkin and melon farm over at my third base. So I begin building that up. Over to episode 49, neither here nor there. This is where I construct the nether tunnels. So the nether tunnels that I use to get from my nether water base to the main base, primarily, or my transport base or my third base. Basically everywhere in my world, I use the nether tunnels that I constructed in this episode. Over to episode 50, this one's where I begin designing a actual main farm for the pumpkins and melons, if I remember correctly. No wait, was it? Oh god, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I believe it was. Where I was designing, because previously melons and pumpkins only could grow on dirt. Well, they grow on tilled soil, not dirt. They could only grow on tilled soil, so I needed to make a contraption that allowed me to auto-till after every harvest. And also wouldn't trample it between harvests. So I had to design a whole thing for that. In which case, the wiring was terrible, because I'm fine with redstone, but I'm not a good designer. Do not expect me to make it look good. Over to episode 51. How fortunate? This is basically me doing show-off stuff with my fortune picks. It's because I actually got a few this episode, so I wanted to basically do a whole bunch of mining this episode. Over to episode 42, Spiders. This is where I construct a spider farm. So, this episode is basically just me showing off the spider farm that I built. I did this with very little time and very little sleep, because this particular time I was working a 70-hour week at my job, so quite tired. So this farm was absolutely designed terribly. I'm terrified to go look at it because I do not remember it remotely. Over to episode 53. This is where I build a blaze farm using water. So that's what happens in this episode, though if I remember correctly, the blaze farm does not work. It needs to be redesigned completely, so probably going to wind up doing that in a future episode. Over to 54, Flood Over Hell. This one is where I actually begin construction of the nether water base, the base I'm at right now. This is the episode where I actually put in the signature water of the base. Over to 55, Jumbled Mess. This is where I construct the XP flipping system for my auto mob drowner, where I can instead flip it over to a dropper system. So they drop down and I can hit them, or they can suffocate in water. This one is possibly one of the dumbest episodes ever made, because I was doing this with such little sleep, but I still insisted on playing the game for some reason. I believe I was awake for about 30-ish hours or so when I was filming this episode, and I just suddenly insisted, nope, I'm going to film today. Today is the filming day. And I decided that episode was going to be one where I designed a redstone system. This episode, I do not know what was running through my mind, but I can tell you from a later episode where I had to redesign everything I built in this episode because none of it worked. Over to 56, full releases, where the full release of the game actually came out. So, very interesting. A lot of this episode was basically me just reviewing stuff that came out in this update, because a lot did come out in that episode. Over to 57, this is where I basically begin doing level 50 enchantments. So this entire episode, I believe, is dedicated just doing level 50 enchantments. I did about 5 or 6 in this one episode, so very big episode for enchanting this one. Over to 58, Heat It Up. If I remember correctly for what I did for this episode, is where I constructed the enchanting table room. So the one where I have all the lava going down, this is that episode. Over to 59, Mind Your Business. This one is for when I actually begin construction of the underground base. Though, once again, another base I haven't done a whole lot with, but this is where I begin construction of it. Over to episode 60, Gooey Start. This is where I begin making a system so I can begin working for the underground base, because I decided the underground base is going to have lava floors. However, that's going to take a lot of lava to do, so I made a system to help me ferry lava back and forth between the nether and there. However, I haven't done much of it since this episode. So it's been about 20 episodes or so, and still haven't done much work since this episode. Then we go over to episode 61, Nether Water Castle. This is where I actually build the central hub pillar of the Nether Water Castle. The one that is, though it's not the center, because I don't have much here at the Nether Water Castle, but it is the main part of the Nether Water Castle. Over to 62, Haunted by Gas. I just continue work here on the Nether Water Base because I felt like it. And this episode is me basically getting harangued by gas. I believe I also begin constructing the very start of what would be the main birch farm. The wood farm, basically, for my world. Over to 63, Hole in Stone. Back to working on the underground base. This is where I begin working on that, doing more mining for that. Over to 64, Full Stack. This is where I put out the initial pitch for my new storage system, in which case it was going to be a large warehouse. I still plan on doing it, however, it's kind of hard to do. Was probably going to wind up building it out of stone, but stone is one of those resources that I'm always low on, so I never know anymore what on earth is going to happen with this project. It's just all the things that we need to make for this thing is going to be the resources that I have the hardest time gathering. So, fun. Over to 65, Forgotten Ice. This is I began working on the Nether Water Base, because while I was going around through my world, I went over to my third base and found over by it the ice farm. I was going over there to see. I can't even remember what I was going over there for. I was basically trying to see if I left anything over the chest there. I was hoping for like 5 ice or something, because I was completely out. So I was like, just give me like 5 ice. That's all I need. And apparently I left like a double chest of ice over there. So, most productive episode by complete accident. Over to 66, Starving Artist. For this particular episode, if I remember correctly, I began working on the sugarcane farm. And the whole joke this episode was that I'm starving the entire episode, but I'm working on the sugarcane farm. A resource that doesn't give food. So, this is where I believe I do a complete overhaul redesign of the sugarcane farm, where it's actually usable now. Over to 67, Little Finish. If I remember correctly for this episode, I begin just working on different parts of the base and just work on the exteriors. So, that's really where that happens. If I remember correctly for this episode, this is where I actually have the main thing of the base, like the main pillar, the main box of the base, is now completely cornered off. At no point is it actually open to the outside world. So this is where this episode happens, where the base actually becomes quote-unquote finished. Over to episode 68, on this particular episode, I actually construct the second part to the massive birch farm. So that birch farm all the way over there, that one now actually has a second floor, thanks to this episode. Over to 69, nothing really happened that episode. Over to 70, Fire Mushroom Water. On this particular episode, oh man, which one did I decide to do? Oh, that's right. On this particular episode, I construct the actual main pond. The massive water lake above the nether. Not above the nether, but right below the roof of the nether. So that way, if I ever wanted to access water again in my nether water base, I can drill directly upwards, and odds are I'll hit a fountain. Over to 71, Inside Out and Upside Down. This one, I basically just show off all the new features of Minecraft 1.2, the version that I'm playing in right now. Because quite a bit was added during this, and also they did a complete redesign of the world file. So, had to just show off that at least. Over to 72, on this particular episode, Little Things, that's right. On this particular episode, I actually, remember that one, thing I broke all the way back there? Where I was, oh wait, it was this one. Where I decided to build, for some reason, stayed up for 30 hours, built a wire that didn't work, don't know why I decided to do it. This episode is actually where I fix it. This is the episode that I was wanting to make, but was too tired to do so, and refused to acknowledge that I was too tired to do it. Over to 73, this is the start of the construction of what would be the project to take over way more episodes than it needed. This one is where I move over a bunch of villagers to begin working on an iron farm. So this episode is me moving over villagers to begin working on that massive project. 74, Advanced Penetration. This is where I actually begin building the main bridge that would lead to that area. And also, this is the episode, just before I move on to that, this is also the episode where I design a device that allows me to get onto the top of the nether without using any resources, outside of, like, obviously the resources to build a machine. But, previously people always needed to build, things like, not build, but would need to make something like, something that would use ender pearls. And I don't really have a lot of ender pearls in my world, so I wanted to make something that didn't use that. So I made a system designed to not use ender pearls to get onto the roof of the nether. Because I did something like that, I decided to make a gold farm. So this episode is me starting the construction of a gold farm. However, not finished. So I need to go back and finish that. This episode was initially intended for that, but then this milestone was happening this episode, so I had to do that. Then over to 76, actual construction, began working on the iron farm. So this is where I build all the downward tunnels and where I begin actually, if I remember correctly, begin constructing upwards. But I believe for this episode, this is mainly just the under parts. Over to 77, this is where I actually start the top part, if I remember correctly. So, actual top, this is also where I begin putting in bricks, if I remember correctly. Spent a lot of this episode worrying about bricks. Like a lot of episodes, a surprising amount of my episodes worrying about bricks. Over to 78, second verse. Literally just the last episode, but it's this one again. So, this is literally just part 2. Over to 79, this is where I wanted to construct a new melon farm, but last minute converted over to a pumpkin farm for some reason. Why I did that? Who knows? I just did. Then over to episode 80, polishing iron. I believe this is where I officially put in all of the doors for the project, so I can begin actually doing different work on it, so it's not just me doing endless construction. Over to 81, this is where I actually put the villagers in and begin worrying about how on earth to make villagers breed, and I was losing my mind over it for a surprising amount of time. Then, over to 82, the villagers are actually breeding, iron golems are actually spawning, but they're not spawning where I need them to. So, there's me losing my mind about how to actually do that, and where I begin actually building the collection system for I'm going to be ferrying over the iron. Then, finally, last but not least, we have this episode. this one is going to be, actually I have to move over here a little bit. This one is episode 83, 24 hours. Just a recap. Actually, let's even that out a little bit. 24 hours. And this one will be uploaded on the nice good old... God, wait a second. Yeah, this is the correct one. It's 5, right? Yeah, it's 5. Yeah, today's 5. Yeah, it's May. Yeah, okay, making sure. 26, good old 12. So, that is today's episode. So, this is basically going to be the way that I hope to begin closing out most episodes, showing this little part off. So, I hope you guys like this little tunnel thing. I hope to actually make this more pretty in later episodes, but today's episode is just one to do the specials. So, now that I got the special out of the way, did the whole recap, showed a whole bunch of images, now it's time to run around the world, grab a whole bunch of screenshots so I can put that in the editing. Today's going to be a big editing video, I know that for sure. But, besides that, I hope you guys enjoyed the little recap. I hope all of you have been consistently watching. This didn't get too boring for you, but yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the little recap. I gotta go mine some wood because I apparently, by accident, AFK'd this farm a lot. So, I'm gonna go work on this. See you guys in the next episode. See ya. Bye!